kind of lines up nicely with it being the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So just wanted to mention that. And so today's event, let's see. Trying to get it to advance here. There we go. All right. Let's walk through our agenda here, right? We are just getting the kickoff here, and I'll walk you through a few things. We'll try to get through that quickly so we can get to our speakers. We have a couple speakers today. We have one of our sponsors, Mimecast. We have Matthew Gartner talking today to us about phishing and 5 things that we may not know about phishing. And then we also have Jim Reavis. We're very lucky to have him today, and he's the CEO and co-founder of CSA, and he'll be talking about vision and initiatives around CSA, so that will be very exciting. And then after that, we'll take questions, obviously, and you know, maybe have some good discussions as well. So let's get started here. Some upcoming events. As I mentioned, we have a couple events this month. We have this event today, as well as at the end of the month, we have a partner, RSA, who is working with us on a couple things. We have an event where they're going to talk about threat hunting, the labyrinth, specifically why it's important to be threat hunting and why it's important to learn that skill set. And then on November 10th, we actually have a hands-on workshop that is free to members, just to make sure everybody's aware of that. And it's a great opportunity to gain a skill that will be useful to you in many ways. Even if you're not directly doing this role today, it's a very useful skill set, and you'll find it'll help you be more efficient as a security professional. And then in December, we do have a joint chapter meeting that we're going to be having with ISSA, and more details will be coming out on that. So join us if you can. And then next year, we already have a couple events planned. I think we mentioned this last month that we are looking to get a Brittany Kaiser, who is a special guest celebrity that we're looking to see if she could come and talk to us about data rights in the cloud. She is a data rights activist, and there's some information here just to, you know, she's an author of the book Targeted, the Cambridge Analytica Whistleblowers Inside Story of How Big Data, Trump, and Facebook Broke Democracy and How It Can Happen Again, which was the basis for the Netflix movie, The Great Hack. And then in February, we already have Melinda Ramble Stone, who is also one of our executive board members as well. She's going to be talking about the changing landscape of application development and application delivery via cloud. So we're happy to have a couple events already scheduled for 2021, but more to come. And then just a reminder that if you aren't a member of the Circle platform yet, you're missing out on a lot of great conversations, information on other events, and just lots of really great discussions that are going on out there. So, you know, if you get a chance, go out there, check it out. There's really, really a lot of good content as a security professional that you might find useful. All right, and then just to mention, we do have some new partnerships, right? I mentioned earlier, RSA, we are partnering with them on this workshop on November 10th, and it's from 1:30 to 3:30, and that's Eastern time, and it's a hands-on. So this is, you know, you'll be using your technical skills and engaged and learning techniques on threat hunting. And, you know, again, this will be a valuable skill that you'll be able to use in the future. And then just to mention as well, we have the Cybersecurity Summit. I know we talked a little bit about this last month as well. I wanted to mention that the Cybersecurity Summit folks have extended the discount of 35% off. So make sure if you are interested in going, you use the code CSA35 for that discount, and hope you can attend. It's 3 days worth of really great speakers. If you just go out there and look at the speakers and the different subjects and the things that they're covering, it's definitely worth your while. All right, just a quick reminder about our event guidelines here. Once the meeting here is being recorded, and once it's complete, by end of day tomorrow, we'll send out the link to the video as well as a link to the presentations, which will be on Circle. Just, if you can keep yourself on mute to limit background noise, that would be great. If you have questions during the presentations, make sure that you use chat. And then if you have, at the end of this, if you have any questions or any feedback, we welcome it. Please use the info@csamn.org, and we're happy to hear from you. All right, I just wanted to once again thank our speakers for today, and we'll get started here. All right, so our first speaker is Matthew Gardner, and he is from Mimecast. He is a principal security strategist. Matthew is an experienced technical product marketing and management executive with a focus on enterprise IT products and services. He has significant experience in multiple security markets, including security monitoring, SIEM, email and web security, SOC management, incident detection and response, identity and access management, and cloud SaaS-based solutions, and web cloud security. So I would like to go ahead and introduce Matthew. Matthew,
great.
take it away.
I assume everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. At least you can. So in the about 10 minutes that I was allocated, first I should thanks for having me and Mimecast. We're happy to be a sponsor for this very important group. I thought, I'm always thinking about what would I want to hear. So usually I want to try to hear something I don't know from somebody who hopefully does know. So I entitled the session 5 Things You Don't Know or May Not, because I don't know you, but about phishing. So everything I'm about to talk about has some connection to phishing, but it's not the phishing that you probably hear more than enough about. So it's not what I call here regular phishing, or think about it as the traditional inbound phishing, like business email compromise or someone trying to get a direct deposit changed by spoofing someone in your company, going to your HR person, or your CEO trying to get target cards, or dropping malware via email, or malicious URLs, or those sorts of things. I'm sure you probably read, hear, and live that on a daily basis. All very important stuff, very, very common, but I'm going to talk about things that are a little less common or a little more emerging, if you will, but again, connected to phishing. And I'm going to list them 1 through 5. So this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but bear with me. I asked the question here, does your organization have a website? Have a website with a login? Have customers, partners, or anyone else that trusts your online brand? Or do you provide anything of value? So it's intended, set up to that there's really no way to not answer the question or these questions yes. But if you answer yes to any of these, there's a type of phishing that you may not be thinking about, where your organization is, instead of receiving the attack, like in the inbound examples I talked about, it's your brand that's being exploited. So what attackers will do is pretend to be your organization via email and via the web, usually by cloning your website, particularly your login page, and then sending out a targeted phishing attacks at organizations or people that they think would trust, your organization, whatever it may be. So they might try to hit your customers, they might try to hit your partners, or really anyone else who might know your brand. So it depends on your organization. And one of the, what they're really trying to do is, instead of hitting your organization, they're leveraging the trust in your brand to steal something or get credentials or engage in a transaction that's fraudulent. The misheld perception here that I see a lot of is that it's not just about top internet brands. I mean, obviously, if you Microsoft or PayPal or Amazon, you live this on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. Someone's trying to knock off your brand because they're ubiquitous brands on the internet. But what we've seen, over the last couple of years is that this whole attack technique has moved down market, if you will, to lesser known brands, whether you be a law firm or a manufacturer or, people do it to Mimecast, spoof our brand online. And the challenge, of course, is would you know if your brand is being spoofed in the wild when the attack doesn't come to your organization? Most organizations rely on, those people reporting it, at security@yourcompany.com that, hey, I got this weird email. But obviously that technique is, hit or miss. So number 2, DMARC. I'm not going to go through what the DMARC acronym stands for because that's usually one ear in one ear and out the other. But what DMARC is, if you don't live in the email world, is it's a standard built upon other standards, DKIM and SPF specifically, that enables you to better lock the use of your domains via email. So if you think of your primary domains that you do business with, without the use of the standards I just mentioned, attackers can pretend to be the owner of that domain and send email on behalf of that domain. It's done for good reasons in that you might have Salesforce or you might have some SurveyMonkey or whatever that you use legitimately and you want it to send from your domain. But of course, without controls, attackers will use it too. One of the big things that's we get asked about, it's like any standard. Its value goes up as it's being used. It's the classic network effect. So, if you want to get value from it, it partly depends on the fact, is anyone enforcing on DMARC? Or, is the use of DMARC becoming, more ubiquitous such that your use of it would actually give you value? And so, like any standard, it gains traction over time if it's going to, ultimately reach value. I think DMARC will, for reasons I just talked about and one I'm about to. But just to give you some statistics, so we have about 40,000 customers around the world. About 20% of them have DMARC enabled. But if you look in certain industry segments, like financial services being one of the ones, or in high-tech manufacturing and high-tech companies, you get up to around 40% of organizations have implemented DMARC on their primary domain. So it's getting to that point where crossing the chasm, or it's getting onto the hockey stick, where it's becoming a basic email security control, and thus the network effect is starting to pay dividends. Another reason why I think it's going to continue to gain traction is that there is another standard built upon DMARC. So you have a standard built upon a standard built upon standards, but this one actually crosses between security and marketing. It's specifically called BIMI, and I won't delve into the acronym, but what this does is actually demonstrated on the right. Much earlier state deployment of this standard, so this is earlier stage, but it starts to cross the border between marketing, where you can use BIMI, in this case Groupon and Aetna in this example are using BIMI, to basically present, to hard code and through cryptology, the use of their logo into the email view of the receiver. So the idea being, it communicates trust that this email really is from Groupon, and it also, we believe will increase the open rates, which is something that obviously marketing cares about. So it's an interesting case where marketing and security can work together and both benefit, and which I think will help drive the use of DMARC over time. So that's 2. Number 3, internally generated phishing attacks are real and are being automated with bots. So again, a lot of people think about phishing as an inbound phenomenon, which of course it is, but they lose track or lose sight of the fact that you're, particularly in now with the predominance of cloud-based email systems like Office 365 and Google being used in companies, that once they steal a credential, or once they drop malware on a machine, they can start to use your email as a platform. And the platform is usually to extend laterally inside, or to use you as a launching point for phishing attacks at organizations that would trust email coming from that person or those people or your organization generally. And like a lot of things, the spread of phishing internally is being automated. So there are now bots that will get credentials. When they get a credential, the bot will log in as that person in your organization, and then churn through the inboxes and the mailboxes of that person and generate mail that's believable or part of a chain internally or outbound. So it can create a tsunami, which I put a tweet that I put out on top of this news item, a tsunami that we often see organizations like not having control of their login credentials and feeling they need to reset them all at once for the whole company, which obviously creates chaos. So this sort of internally generated phishing attacks is a real thing.
Hey, Matthew.
Yeah.
There's a question about what about ARC and ARC Seal?
Yeah, so those are standards that, at least the ARC standard, I'm not sure about ARC Seal, is a standard that tries to bridge the problem of intermediaries in email. So I send an email to an email forwarder, and that can mess up the DKIM signature. And so ARC is a way of essentially making the cryptology of the email more portable. I don't know if I've described that perfectly, but that's basically the idea behind it. So there is this challenge between signing something that gets forwarded, because the forwarder often will put more text into the thing, into the mail, which then breaks the cryptology. Okay, so number 4. So this issue of awareness, phishing awareness, and then the actions that you want people not to take in many cases, it sort of is a generalized phenomenon with phishing that those aren't equal. This issue of general awareness and understanding and action are not the same thing. And so while most organizations have a security awareness training program of some type, it's like 95% of organizations that we poll have something. They do some sort of training. It's not very effective. And so I have some statistics in a survey that we're actually going to release next week that sort of tells that story. But we did a survey of over 1,000 business users, and we essentially asked them, are you aware, at least on the American side, are you aware that links in email and elsewhere can infect your device? And essentially everybody said yes, but the majority of people responding said they are engaging, they are clicking, they are opening suspicious mails, and they're consistently, the majority are not reporting them when they receive them, and there could be a number of reasons why that is, but nonetheless, they're not reporting them. And so there's this gulf between sort of awareness in general of a problem and then what I should and shouldn't do about it. And so, that affects obviously the ultimate target of a phishing attack, if it gets to be delivered, is a person. And so, you want your people to be your sort of last line of defense. And so far, the awareness is not bleeding over into understanding and action in general. And the 5th item is something that I've been kind of, I won't say cynical about, that's a little too strong, but casting a wary eye on the use of AI in security over the years. I mean, probably all of us, when we used to go to events, have been to events, and you see AI this and machine learning that, and you're like, how does that really relate to reality? And what can be applied in real life? And I've noticed a change. I think there's the adoption curve of technology, or the hype cycle, which Gartner calls it. It's this technology is following that curve, and it's now coming to a place where it's now starting to add value. And specifically with phishing, in my experience, there are a lot of ways that AI and machine learning related techniques can be applied to help with the phishing detection challenge. I put a list here of areas that I know that it's providing some value, but for example, malicious URL detection. You can actually use, learnings from billions of malicious or millions, hundreds of millions of malicious URLs to understand the structure of a potentially malicious URL to flag it as risky. So literally just from the characters that are in it, how many are in it, and how it's structured even. In addition, website categorization. So that's a hard problem, is to, when someone wants to go to a website via, a click in a browser or via a click in an email, category filters can apply and be very useful, but if you don't categorize the website correctly, that filter doesn't really help you much. So using supervised learning to categorize websites automatically can, improve the efficacy and then the speed at which those sites are categorized. So you can, given a lot of sites are uncategorized in many services, if you have a more automated way to categorize them, it can have a lot of impact on phishing-related attacks that use URLs and websites. But like anything, it's not a silver bullet. Like AI and machine learning is a tool to complement, I think, the techniques that are in common practice. It's just no one technique is perfect. So, you need to keep moving the needle and complementing techniques that work sometimes with techniques that help fill the gaps. And I think AI is turning into that excellent gap filler. That is it. I think that's my 10 minutes. I'll check to see if there's any questions and hand it back to the host.
Sounds good. Thank you, Matthew. When you had the percentages slide, all I could think of, the people clicking on phishing emails, and all I could think of was personally, sometimes who doesn't have a parent that clicks on phishing emails all the time?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Awesome. Does anybody have any other questions? All right. All right. Well, with that, we are going to introduce our next speaker, and we are very honored to have Jim Reavis with us today. For those who don't know Jim, he is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Cloud Security Alliance. Just a quick bio on Jim is that for many years, he's worked in the information security industry as an entrepreneur, writer, speaker, technologist, and business strategist. His innovative thinking and emerging security trends have been published and presented widely throughout the industry and have influenced many. Jim is helping shape the future of information security and related technology industries as the co-founder and CEO and the driving force of Cloud Security Alliance. Just last piece is Jim has been named one of the top 10 cloud computing leaders by searchcloudcomputing.com. So welcome, Jim.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Christy. Much too kind. I'm here at CSA's new corporate headquarters, a little bit noisy. We're on the harbor too, a little bit of train noise, so we'll see how this all goes. But I am going to attempt to present here, and you can let me know if you see my slides okay. Let's see, and there they go. So I'm assuming you're going to see this.
Yep.
What I'm going to good. Thanks. Awesome. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit from my perspective about the resources available to a chapter, some of the key trends we're seeing, talking to a lot of enterprises and technologists. And if I have time, there's a little bit of a bonus sort of inside of a presentation on here's how I talk to organizations about organizations that are looking to make this digital transformation into the cloud, go cloud first, what are the security issues, and tie it into CSA best practices. So it's always my pleasure to be having these conversations with chapters. I think you're sort of the atomic unit of Cloud Security Alliance and associations like us, because we're really about the people, the rank and file, InfoSec professionals, We don't go to Davos and go to the wine and cheese crowd. We like to have beer and pretzels with the cybersecurity pros out there that are on the front line trying to say things. And so I want to hear what you guys are doing and the challenges and the issues you have, and make sure that they're always sort of steering Cloud Security Alliance to benefit you. So we have been around now for 11 years, and we're focused on security best practices, looking into what's coming next, not necessarily everything we're focused on now, and a lot of great free best practices, a lot of research done, provider certification, individual certification, and we've kind of been at the right place, the right time, and we've been able to really consider to be the authority in a lot of respects. Right now, free membership for individuals, 105,000 plus, about 400 plus corporate members. And I'm going to go through a few different areas. We are in the Seattle, Bellingham, Washington, greater Seattle area is the US headquarters. So apologies for stealing that game from you guys last Sunday, but it had to be done. So a little bit about the capabilities of CSA. And so I mentioned the certification. We have the CCSK, which I think a lot of you are familiar with. It's actually been around now for just about 10 years. And something that's new that I have a slide I'll talk about is a certificate of cloud auditing knowledge. And then our STAR program, I have a slide on that. We have training, we have some tools that tend to be more for the corporate members, threat sharing, and our StarWatch SaaS application, and just a ton of research artifacts that are out there, a lot of working groups. We've done this by ourselves in collaboration with governments, with universities. And in normal years, we have a lot of great conferences. This year we've pivoted and we have over 100 of our Cloud Byte webinars. So in terms of getting involved, and you guys are doing a really good job. When I have sort of this slide and I'll go present at chapters, and they're not doing any of it, but there's a lot you can do, and you're holding events. You can do the CCSK study groups to be able to pass the exam. We try to be really liberal in terms of handing out free exam tokens to board members, as well as like real active volunteer members. So when in doubt, go bug Todd and see what you can get. You can also participate in our global research working groups, and then in your local community or within your sphere, you can sort of wear that hat as a participant in one of those working groups and be able to sort of be the local expert for that. You can also, as some chapters are doing, some of your own research and do that in collaboration with us on a global perspective. The threat hunting sorts of areas you guys are getting into, very interesting. Maybe you guys can be the threat hunting center of excellence within CSA, who knows. There was a shout out for Circle, and we just need the control of our own platform. We've tried to do this for years with social media, and social media is an important part of how we all communicate. It's also not quite what I thought it would be when I started CSA in 2009. So we need our own platform we have more control over, and we'd encourage you to do that. So we look for you to do the outreach in your community, work with us, and we can get more funding for you. We just need to be proactive and then get a heads up on what you're doing. And so let us help you. And from an individual perspective, again, I'm all about the individual cybersecurity professional. How can we help you with your network? How can we help you with your career development? So I'm going to provide this deck. I updated a little bit. I'm going to make sure that you have this, that it's emailed, the chapter can distribute it. But what I wanted to do is provide links and just an overview of, like, here's the very popular by download research that we have, our guidance, which we started in 2009, which we've updated many times. Our top threats, which is a very regularly research on what are the things you need to be most concerned about now. Our Cloud Controls Matrix is our most popular download by an order of magnitude, because almost every organization is using this in some way, and a lot of times as the internal standard on how they sort of measure their cloud experience. And so, and several others, I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's a lot of great research, and these are just really a few curated out of that 300 plus research artifacts that we have. And these come from our different research working groups. And again, I'm not going to go into all of them, but maybe I'll point out a couple. So our blockchain distributed ledger one is really, it just took off this year. We've been messing around with what to do, and after RSA, we set up a sort of new charter, and we're working on a framework, an essential security framework for blockchain for financial services. We have depository trust, which is like critical infrastructure. They do all the back end settlements for the US stock exchanges leading that. And that's a really cool one. It's interesting to see what's going on there. Containers, microservices, the DevOps areas, things that are very cloud native, or sorts of things we're spending a lot of time on. So there's a lot in here, and something that probably will suit your interest. And if you feel that we're not addressing a topic that's of interest, then let us know, and we can set you up with a new charter. We can socialize it, and maybe there's a new working group that needs to happen. So the STAR program is one thing I also wanted to sign. This is more of the organizational certification, and this is something where we took our cloud controls matrix and our assessment questionnaire, and we about 9 years ago, I think, we put this into a structure where cloud providers could submit their assessments, and it's something that we've gone beyond the self-assessment to a lot of third-party audits. It's the biggest repository worldwide that I know of, over 1,000 entries. FedRAMP, which is the US government's cloud provider certification program, just passed, I believe just passed 200, so it gives you some understanding, but there's a lot more that we need to do with this, and so we're always going to continue to be working on this and getting more and adding APIs to make this repository programmatically accessible to go into risk management consoles, things like that. So an important part of what we do. So a little bit on sort of what we're seeing and how it's high stakes right now for cloud security, high stakes for a lot of things in the world. I wanted to just share a little bit about what we've seen in terms of COVID and how that's gone and what the impact's been. So we have certainly seen a greater usage in cloud because of this, when you've had to have people make these very quick contingency plans. And so that's just been a natural thing. There's been a lot more of that. And overall, the resilience has been pretty good. We've seen in some places there's been some resource exhaustion issues and putting up new compute sessions. And certainly with certain applications, like you could go look at the whole sort of webinar platform like we're doing now, you've seen some quality of service issues with things like that. But overall, if you compare, for example, doing a VDI inside of a cloud provider versus doing VDI with your own internal systems, having that hosted in an internal data center, the cloud has tended to perform better, and I'm certain there's outliers that have gone in the other direction, but most organizations did not develop their disaster recovery or contingency planning for 100% of their workforce worldwide needing to be home. And a lot of times they've had it geared and architected for about 10% or so. So overall, it's been done pretty well. Certainly, we've seen a lot of mistakes that have been made in this rush to go back to home. There was, for one example, we've seen several places where they had to have a real loosening of standards instead of the standard corporate desktop, because they just weren't able to do that. It's like, work with what you have, and maybe you mitigate some of that if you're doing some sort of a virtual desktop. But there's been, because of this, a lot of what I call data entropy, where information's gotten spread around in places where it hasn't needed to be and shouldn't be. And so that's been a real issue. A lot of the performance issues have caused people to see if we could like poke holes in firewalls and do what we need to do to just get things working and create a less secure environment. lesson learned has been that when you've gone to this work from home, because you don't have the physical security capabilities and controls that things like the two-factor authentication where you're using a fob or something like that, that might be more questionable if you don't have a good way of making sure that you as the worker that should have it are keeping it away from everyone who's in the house. And so we are seeing a lot of companies look in kind of this sort of a tactical scramble method into biometrics, into some other things that can still do the multi-factor, but do in a way that you are definitely focused on the individuals that should have access. So definitely we've heard in terms of corporations that have in the middle of the pandemic said, hey, we want to join CSA as a corporate member, to say that, hey, they've found that this has taught them that there are issues with they're too focused on their legacy IT systems. They thought they had a longer sort of runway to move along their cloud adoption journey. They learned that, hey, some of the digital transformation projects just could not be done with the traditional legacy IT. And so they've said, hey, I think a lot of us sort of feel this, that obviously COVID-19 is bad, but there will be good things that come out of it. And there also will be permanent changes. I don't buy in that we're all going to be working from home forever and that it's the death of cities and things like that. We definitely have some issues we need to deal with, but I don't think it takes into account the we're going to see in terms of sanitization technologies for buildings, UV lighting, all sorts of things. And so we are going to see that return, but we're also going to see, hey, for certain jobs, it is actually a great sort of environment to work virtually, but you got to have the architecture, the technology in this digitally transformed way, and that just has to be based on cloud. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing this sort of shift has been, okay, this is not, we know now it's not going to be a 3-month project. It's not going to be forever, but we need to understand what we're going to make permanent out of this this cloud movement as a result of COVID-19. And so a lot of interesting things, and I bring a lot of this up because I think we're going to be doing more research on this, which isn't just jumping on the bandwagon of things I already know, but how do we sort of meaningfully navigate this for organizations and cybersecurity professionals, and with all of the related technology best practices. So I thought I'd put this slide up. It's just sort of for you to be, I think, geared and armed to talk to your community, to talk to your employer about this, in fact, this shift to cloud and how it's important when, you know, I try to look at our industry for a lot of different areas. Certainly I want CSA to be successful, but I also just worry about the health of the industry, because if the cybersecurity industry suffers because of a global economic downturn, breaches are going to go up. There's not going to be enough people that can man all the different areas that we need. And so it's really important that we can have a strong industry from a holistic basis. But I thought this was interesting because Gartner, in the middle of the pandemic in June, they changed their spending forecast for 2020, and still it was overall positive, but they lowered it quite a bit. But you can see where it got raised, and what sort of raises the whole ship is cloud security, 33% increase. Everything else is negative or single-digit growth. And you look at it also, the cloud security aspect, it's not numerically as large as a lot of other areas because you're provisioning this as a service, and it is more cost-effective, agile, I think. But it's still pretty immature, and there's still a lot that we need to do. I see a lot of startups all the time. So by immature, I mean, it's very dynamic, and you see a lot of different cloud security workload management and a lot of different areas that just haven't been around for a long time. So it's pretty interesting, and you know, share that slide with people who are asking, well, why should we care about this? Why should we spend time on these different areas? So I wanted to talk just a little bit about, okay, what does that mean for enterprises in the directions to kind of sum that up. And I try to spend as much time as I can with the architects, the CISOs, a lot of those within our enterprise membership, which those tend to be more global 2000 companies than anything else. That's the largest share of that group. A little bit of government, but it tends to be private sector. Financial services is the largest group there. But certainly what they're telling us is cloud acceleration is we have to go faster. Ones that aren't very far into the cloud, they're saying we have to get much more in the cloud. Ones that have been in it quite a bit, they're saying we've got to mature our approach and get more value out of it. And so that seems to be kind of a consensus. Skills gap remediation is a big thing with staff, and we're from university to a lot of what's available in continuing professional education to just what's available in a lot of conferences. Is there's a lot of question on, are we teaching the very leading edge sorts of things, which is kind of a challenge because some of it just hasn't been around quite a while, and some of the most leading edge things like how do you secure Kubernetes could be a YouTube video. And so it becomes a little bit of a challenge, and there may not be as many of the formal programs around all of the necessary skills. So that's a big sort of, I'd say maybe a question mark that a lot of enterprises have. They know they need to do it. Is it an add to staff? Is it retraining? And then where do we go get that education? And again, that's where I think an organization like CSA has an important role to play. And more than that, the chapters have a pretty important role to play to do that. You're the force multiplier that's going to make that happen. So I have a slide on this later, a lot about how we ramp up our DevOps, DevSecOps, how do we create these frameworks to go really be more cloud native in what we're doing. So that comes up quite a bit. The idea of multi-cloud hybrid. So what we find is a lot of enterprises, from an infrastructure as a service perspective, they kind of want to have a preferred platform, but for regulatory reasons, risk management reasons, a lot of different things, they want to have a level of competency and a level of usage of 2 or 3 infrastructure as a service platforms. And so they're not building cross-cloud applications as much as having that competency and having applications in multiple clouds, but wanting to understand how do you move workloads between those in a fairly agile way, and do that in a way that you're tracking, understanding what you're doing. And a lot of this, it's process best practices, and it's also some newer technology. So that's definitely a big interest, a big pain point. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in another slide, but this whole idea of needing to have this sort of virtual organization, software-defined perimeter, which is CSA's project, and the principles of zero trust, which have a high alignment degree of affinity with this. That's kind of becoming more of this blueprint. How do we do that to have these virtual private clouds inside of public cloud that are highly secure, that we can trust that as much and perhaps more than our own internal data centers becomes pretty important. And when you talk about end-to-end, and in the old days, I think that meant, hey, from a desktop to a host, and it meant sort of more of a network, more of a layer 3 sort of view. Now it means more of a higher layer, and it means this idea of work from home, or a very virtual understanding of where the user is, or even a non-user sort of entity and asset, like an IoT sensor to cloud. And it's people to applications, and it's other non-traditional entities that have an identity to those cloud hosted assets as well. So that's kind of the way that organizations are sort of thinking about that. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about.
Hey, Jim. Hey, yeah. Jim, there's a couple questions that we want to go through right now. Regarding this specifically for enterprise directions, there was a question asked, where are you getting this information from?
I'm getting this from interviews with our enterprise members. And so our enterprise members are about 100 plus global companies. They're global 2000 companies where we talk with their chief security officers, cloud security architects tend to be like the top job titles for those. We have a monthly enterprise user council, and then we also do some interviews. So it's not externally sourced information. It's talking as part of our onboarding of these organizations. We say, what are your priorities? What's your cloud path look like? What's your journey look like? And so that's where we collect this data. So it's anecdotal, but from a pretty large base. So,
Gotcha.
and what was the other question?
There was a statement just made like cloud security is eating on-premise security controls on the previous slide. I'll repeat that again. That someone said that cloud security is eating, in quotes, on-premise security controls.
Well, so every organization is becoming software defined, and that is sort of the way it should be, I think, where we've got to think very virtually and build all these layers of security. Look, you can't use the physical security controls to really believe that you are able to protect assets if you don't have layered on a lot of that context around identity, encryption, all of these other security controls. I mean, we're getting so full of technology. If you thought you could even take a data center and unplug it from the internet, someone's going to put a Nessus on a drone and fly it over it. And so, every what's the statistic? Every asset that gets connected to the internet gets scanned in under a minute. And so that is true. And my view is we've got to think about logical security. It goes back to the Jericho Forum folks of the early 2000s, which were actually a pretty big inspiration for me to start Cloud Security Alliance, that said we've got to break down those walls. So I would agree with the statement. I don't know if he meant it it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing.
Taken from a different point of view, Jim, that eating on the on-premise security controls, when you then take it off-premise, do you feel, and from your discussions with other enterprises, when you take it off-premise, are you opening up other doors, or other holes, for security, that your security posture, because you need to connect to these systems, so is your security posture potentially lessened? Are you having those types of discussions?
So we think about this, and our top threats research is a good way to sort of characterize this. We think about any sort of change creates potential new threat vectors that need to be dealt with. Change can create insecurity, complexity can create insecurity, but those are sort of requirements to actually existing in the digital world we have now. We understand we have to be in a world that changes. It used to be the case when I started in technology, you would upgrade systems maybe once every couple of years, and you look at code changes multiple times a day for any sort of application. So certainly, if it's not done right, and that's sort of the whole sweet spot for Cloud Security Alliance, is to say, we're not here to be cheerleaders for the cloud. We're saying it's here. It's part of the natural progression of compute becoming a consumerized and becoming a service and becoming a utility. And so how do we find the best ways to secure it? So I would say that we don't, and I'll hold a little bit of it because I have a slide that talks more about this, but we don't at this point see a lot of the what you call very sort of deep attacks like Rowhammer, attacking memory specifically inside of a big cloud provider and then jumping sort of laterally to attack things. And the reason for that is because it's the simple stuff that is so easy to attack and exploit, and the patching and all those sorts of things that tend to be the cloud consumer, the cloud tenant that is doing that. So yeah, we do think that there's always the chance if you can do things dumb, you can forget to put the security controls on your storage buckets. You make it world accessible before putting all the controls on, that you hard code keys and passcodes inside of some cloud applications, and they're in a GitHub repository. So yeah, there's a lot of dumb things you can do in the cloud that would make it more insecure, but those are known things that we can control. And so it's a lot of that's about education. So hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, and then the last question is, will corporate members be able to use its tokens for the audit certification too? Yes,
we're working on the policy for that. The answer is yes. We're bundling the accessibility for the certificate of cloud auditing knowledge into our corporate membership, as we have had with the CCSK, the certificate of cloud security knowledge. So the answer for that is yes. All right. So I will move on, and actually there is a slide roadmap. My first slide is about the CCAK. So this is something that we're very excited about, and the cloud controls matrix has been our for about, I think that's about 10 years old. That's become our most popular download, and I can go look at downloads and I can see that every member of the Fortune 500, with maybe a couple exceptions, and probably they're just doing them other names, they download it, they use it. Very, very pervasive. And then that led to our CAIQ, our assessment questionnaire, and our STAR program. And I talk about being sort of this grassroots, want to be a man of the people. Well, we've also spent a lot of time with our STAR program saying, hey, you, this industry or this country, instead of creating your own cloud security certification for your government or your industry, why don't you use STAR? And there's a lot of logic to that, and some do, and most of them will point to it, but that's a lot harder. And what I find is that governments, they're not going to give up that sort of regulatory impetus. And a bigger sort of thing I've seen over 10 years, it's much more clear cybersecurity is part of national security, and I just spent a lot of time internationally. So, it's kind of a roundabout way of saying that I feel that we're going to create a lot more advancements in the overall baseline of health of security, trust in the cloud, through the individual grassroots route and through the individual professionals. So while we'll work both sides, we'll work government, we'll work the corporate side, it's through the individuals. And so the CCAK is something that we started work on in earnest late last year and made just a lot of great progress, and really looking at how do you do this. It's very different, and you can't do the same sort of destructive testing in the cloud. A lot of it's really understanding how things are configured and understand the whole process around how DevOps is rolled out. And so it's really changes it in pretty significant ways. There's a lot of principles that stay the same, but how it is pretty different. And so we made a ton of progress, and actually the body of knowledge is pretty much complete now. But what's really exciting is that we got ISACA to join with us, and this is now a joint venture that's a 50-50 venture essentially with ISACA, and we think this is a game changer and is really going to help us reach that community of CISAs. And ISACA is an organization I did some consultative work with years before I started Cloud Security Alliance, and I've been a member of ISACA for 20 years or so. So I'm real excited about this. I think it's going to make it a lot more powerful. And again, we want to figure out what we can do to really help chapters adopt, embrace this, kind of be early, get early access to it. So something we're super excited about, but it's I think a great endorsement for what we've come up with, that ISACA wants to partner with us on this. So another roadmap item that we're working on for 2021, our STAR program, which I mentioned, we think, as far as we know, it's the largest worldwide, that's sort of cloud specific security statements. on part of cloud providers. That some feedback we've gotten is that if you look at SaaS companies, and I actually got a slide where I talk a little bit more about this, that it's kind of a challenge to do 295 questions, 130 plus controls, and are there more essential controls or a lighter way to do this? And we've actually gotten this feedback from small SaaS companies that say it's too hard, and also from very large enterprises that say we have too many of these small SaaS companies that business units adopt, that it's too hard for us to have sort of a basic understanding of the security hygiene. And so this is something we have a couple different looks at this, something we've started working on internally, and then some large enterprise users came with us, and so they're doing a focus group on it, and we're kind of working on those two groups together. So we are working on that, and we expect to have something we will release that provides more of a lighter weight approach to these small SaaS companies, which again are a very important part of critical infrastructure for a lot of organizations. So, we're looking at thinking about things on, we have had our IoT controls framework for quite a while, and we're looking at, can we do things that are more specific to IoT? That probably means like cloud services that are interacting specifically with IoT, but it remains to be seen. So we're going to do some of that evaluation here later this year in 2021, and we want to grow. I don't know that we're going to post metrics yet, but really we want to have a lot broader coverage. It's hard to say how many business SaaS companies there are. I've heard 50,000, 100,000. If you go look at like a mobile app store, a Google Play, it's getting close to 3 million. So we've got to get bigger coverage there, and so we know that. So
another question for you, Jim.
Sure.
Can existing ISACA certifications be used as credits for CCAK?
So we're working on a lot of the policies because we also have the CCSK, and the thing I will say is that one thing, it's not an accreditation, it's a certificate of competency, which means it's a body of knowledge and a test. It's not experience that's substituted. So and because we do think we need this new body of knowledge, why we came up with it, that there's likely not a lot of substitutes there, but what we are working with ISACA on are policies that would provide credit for individuals that hold various ISACA credentials or hold the CSA's CCSK, and see what we can do to make it more accessible. And I don't want to make an announcement on my own without that, but I think you would see there's a real benefit if you are inside of ISACA right now, that this would be more accessible, be less expensive for you to do. So with that, so the next slide on roadmap items, here's just to give you guys insight on things that we're looking at, thinking about. You know, we're always going to have individual free membership, I believe, for CSA, but we are sort of trying to explore what a premium individual membership would look like. Is there a need for it? Is it something that we just take like our CCAK or CCSKs and say, okay, that is the premium membership? Are there other things? Again, I'm very big about career development, and even more than just improving skill set, but actually trying to connect people together with potential jobs. And it's something where I think we're going to build some synergies with our corporate members that are always looking for some great individual professionals, and see how we can make that more valuable. But you know, we're going to definitely involve the chapters more in helping us think this through. But we are looking at that, and it's ongoing, and we probably have some announcements next year. And we're not looking to take away anything from what people already get, but are there things we can add? We have an MOU, which you may have seen with ISSA, and it's great. It sounds like from what I was hearing, you guys are working with ISSA, and that's something we encourage. Actually, that was an organization. I was their executive director for a while, way back when, and enjoyed that very much. We're exploring the developer community, and that's something I'm actually wanting to do with ISSA. We're spending more time with some CISO consultants to look at what we can do to have more value prop that you, from a chapter perspective, can share with the CISOs to maybe get them to participate, not all the time, but in a few things annually based on some stuff we can develop. I think you're going to see a SDP Zero Trust personal certification, another maybe somewhat lightweight, but training to really show, hey, I know how to build these virtual private clouds. I understand the different technology components and how to go, again, that end-to-end being work from home to cloud. So I think that's an important area. More stuff on Circle. Please get in Circle and give us your feedback on what we need to be doing. But we're going to be adding some additional benefits there. And always we're always pivoting with new research ideas. We're, I think, struggling a little bit on the AI side, and open for feedback on what we should be doing there. That's been a tough one. But we'll see. Okay, so
hey Jim, what type of enhancements? Can you go into more detail of the enhancements to Circle?
Yeah, so not in a lot of real specific detail. I think what we're trying to do is to create a better integration with a knowledge base that captures a lot more of the information that's flowing around there. So there's better search capabilities so that you can actually, there's too much reinventing the wheel, and there's a lot of people who've solved problems that we just haven't gotten out there, and it's a matter of like tagging a lot of our different research. It's some technology there. It's getting like things like this event to be captured more in there. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of that. We're also working with corporate members on how can you incentivize and how can you make special offerings available to our members so that there's actually more product and more technology freebies and things like that are available if you're in Circle. And so there's a lot of other things we're looking at to make it something that's more user friendly. The navigation could definitely use some help. We know people get lost in there, so that's something we're working on as well. So, but not a lot of real specifics, but you'll see these things sort of introduced piecemeal throughout 2021. But you got to be there to be able to see them. So what I was going to do, and it looks like I do have time, is to just kind of go quickly through a few slides on here's how I talk to organizations about how they should be thinking about moving to cloud securely, and it contextualizes this with CSA research. So, you know, the first thing that I do is I say, hey, go back to the definitional notion of cloud, and this is chapter 1 of our guidance. And the innovation that CSA had is we took the NIST definition of SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, and we conceptualized it as this layered model. And that really helps you understand that cloud is really this mashup, and you've got a SaaS application, and it's got these underlying infrastructure layers and several companies involved, and it changes all the time. So understand that, understand this sort of this kind of cumulative nature of how cloud applications work. Then what we say is kind of understand from that framework how cloud has evolved. And the inverted pyramid really is this, hey, any organization has a small number of infrastructure as a service providers, maybe more platform tools, and a huge number of software as a service applications. And so understand that, larger number of vendors in SaaS, smaller amount of vetting, a lot more of the shared responsibility for the technical implementation is in infrastructure. So it's kind of a simple, this sort of one, understand the layered model, two, understand how the shared responsibility shifts in the different cloud delivery models, and then three, understand the reality of the marketplace and where you got to put your focus based on the different type of cloud services. So we say use that, and then we say, okay, understand stay current on what the top threats are, and this is a way to do it. And this was something that I was sort of alluding to. I had a slide on it. I encourage people to go to this, and that basically the message to a lot of people out there, it's these bread and butter security issues, and we're not patching, we're not configuring right, we're not handling the change control. Maybe there's due diligence issues, visibility issues, and these are all things that are solvable problems, or at least addressing them head on and being educated allows you to reduce sort of the blast radius of having issues here. So understand those threats. Then I tell them, okay, so understand that in this new cloud world, this digital transformation, understand organizations are becoming software defined. So understand what that means from an architecture perspective. So understand software defined perimeter, zero trust, and it's really more, it's this identity as the perimeter. So it's not get online and then find out what you can access, but identify yourself. And then based on that, in this sort of least privilege model, then we can architect systems that say, okay, you can have access to these sorts of areas. You know, look at it from a cloud native perspective, look at it from an orchestration perspective, and we're talking about very resilient software replacing resilient hardware here. So, you know, understand the architecture. And again, these are resource areas, research areas that CSA has made available. So then understand the cloud development from the infrastructure perspective. And, you know, I actually was on a panel recently with the CISO of Goldman Sachs and a security executive of American Express, and they said, we're getting more comfortable with infrastructure as a service, and we feel like we can make that as secure and even more secure than on-premise. But it means really being mature in these areas, the continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, having that developed in really good frameworks. And, you know, we have a working group on this. We talk about how you need the security champion sort of embedded into that DevOps framework that are representing the security team to the developers and the business units. They're embedded there in sort of an empowering way. We want to help you go faster in developing your applications in a secure way versus an adversarial approach. So it's a cultural aspect there too. But we're saying really understand the frameworks, the technologies, the shift left, the culture side of that becomes really important. Then we talk about procurement. Understand that, and this is where the same people I was talking about that they said they're feeling really comfortable with the infrastructure as a service, they're less comfortable with the software as a service because it's separate organizations, separate entities. They don't have the same transparency, and this is where we talk about our tools and Cloud Controls Matrix, CAIQ, STAR program, and that the reality, the economics of it and the scale means organizations need to dump their own proprietary onboarding questionnaires and risk assessment processes, and then they need to take standard things like what CSA has developed and just tweak them a little bit for the 10 to 20% of unique things that represent their organizations. And so this is what we talk about from more of that procurement side from that original model. And then one of the last ones on this is the understand all these different functional areas. I just get very, one, I can't have to be very vendor neutral and saying, hey, it's different product segments and all these sorts of things, but really look at what are the different types of tools that are rapidly changing. Don't assume you know if you went to RSA a couple of years ago that you know what the cloud security vendors look like, what they're doing. But this is kind of a laundry list of a lot of the different capabilities that you see that are sort of cloud native security capabilities that you just want to look for, hey, do we have that sort of capability? And again, stay real current. And then I just threw in this one slide that we've had a very well-known CISO as a consultant for us. That's like, he put together these, here's the C-level challenges with cloud that he's seeing right now. And I'm thinking we're going to turn this into like a top threats type of thing. That what are the C-level challenges with cloud on an ongoing basis, and continue to get vetting from C-levels on this. So I'm not going to really go into it due to time, but certainly us being able to talk about cloud to the board of directors from a security, a strategy perspective is important. There's a lot here to dig into. And so I think this will be a future white paper, hopefully pretty soon, that we'll come out with, that will probably lead to a ton of different white papers. So anyway, for what it's worth, take a look at it. And then, so just to sum things up, so, this is what I'm viewing as cloud. COVID-19 certainly tragic. We're, as CSA, we're not really suffering from it from a business perspective, other than conferences. And people are really recognizing, yeah, we've got to do more cloud, therefore we've got to do more cloud security. And so, have the knowledge, understand that layered model, understand the threats, build the strategy, you get this embedded into that pipeline, be agile, stay current, level up skill sets. So that's the message when I'm talking. That's the kind of, if I could deputize you guys to talk on my behalf out there to the community, that's kind of how I'd like you to put it in like those last 8 slides or whatever. So that was the presentation within the presentation, and then this is the end of the presentation. So I don't know if there's time for more questions, but hopefully this has been useful, and I am gonna go ahead and email this off to the chapter leaders so they can distribute the presentation as needed.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. Super informational. And yeah, folks, if you have questions, we do have time. So go ahead and either ask them outright or go ahead and type them.
Well, my son's in the back there. He's been watching me the whole time. I'm pretty nervous. It's very possible I've bored people to tears, and so they got to get on.
Not at all. That was a lot of information. That was fantastic.
All right.
Actually,
all
really
right.
was
Well,
fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I will.
Question.
Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, I'm Kathy LaJoy Malik, and I really appreciate the energy, the thought, the structure, the candidness, and the forward thinking of what you presented. I think it's really important. Also, coupling that with the governance conversations that are, there are lots of opportunities out there. I'll follow up on that further separately. I wanted to ask you, in addition to the alliance partnership with ISACA, are there other associations that you feel like there could be opportunity for partnership, or any topics which would create other avenues for expanding the breadth of understanding in this very important space?
Well, thanks for the kind words, and that's a really good question, and it's something that we discuss a lot. So one, I think it's really important people understand that we take a really big tent approach to this, and my view is that Cloud Security Alliance doesn't have any competitors. We only have friends in the industry. And if another organization came up with a better cloud controls framework, good for them, because we're here for the community, and we're a nonprofit. We're not here to make a lot of money. So, the obvious sort of organizations like ISACA and ISSA that you're working with are great. ISC Squared, I know they've gone through a leadership change, and I haven't met their new leader, but I think that obviously they're a very important part of the ecosystem. But something we're really kind of struggling with and wanting to get better sort of alliances is on the privacy front. So privacy is something that's this dual-edged sword with our industry. It always has been. On the one hand, security enables privacy, and we've been around longer as a discipline, and we provide more of that structure. But also, privacy gets in the way sometimes of some of security thinks and does its work, does its business. And so IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, I think super highly of that organization. Trevor Hughes, I think he's just a top tier guy. We've not ever like really gelled in a really good way. I haven't figured out why that is.
Uh-oh.
Great.
It's
Oh,
like-
did we? Yep. Froze
Oh,
up a
there he
little
is.
bit.
Am I back? It
Yeah.
lost me for a second. So what I was going to say, I think privacy is like one that we got to go figure out what is a more of a synergistic way to go do that. Developer community is a real big one. I think OWASP is one that we might have more resources than them on a global basis, but I love the focus and what they do. I think we should definitely work with them, and then just locally work with universities, work with community colleges on bringing in that next group. You can work earlier than that. I haven't quite figured out, but yeah, we want to do an all of the above approach for sure.
Outstanding.
All right, good question.
Hello, I just have a quick question regarding your mention of embedding security into DevOps. Could you give us insight as to your experience with challenges or methods to do that, specific to resources to be able to spread across all the development groups?
Yeah, so what we find is that security tends to engage at a point in time in the DevOps process. And I think it might have been Adobe who shared some case study. There might be a blog about it on our website, is that this embedding meant more not that you were building relationships with the team, they were a permanent fixture there. And so you built this sort of cultural thing. They could do more, hey, lunch and learn things on a regular basis. And then the sort of point in time where you've got to maybe do a QA check, you've got to do a test for vulnerabilities, those sorts of things, kind of they're less sort of controversial because you've sort of worked in there with them, and so you've built it in better. So everybody sort of understands this sort of shift left built-in security, but you don't do it if you're not engaged, and you're not engaged if you're not sort of having a way to be in that business unit more in a more regular basis. And so we found it's been more of that cultural thing. But again, I'd go look on our website. I think it was an Adobe blog that talked about this cultural part of it, and go check that. And then we do have our DevSecOps sub-working groups that are also starting to crank out.
Thank you.
Right. You guys can also look at, so we got Jeff Bezos over here too. My granddaughter defaced him literally because she thought he looked a little bit too much like Lex Luthor, but so.
That's awesome. Oh, all right. Any other questions?
Well, I'm happy to come back anytime you guys invite me back.
Cool. Thank you, Jim.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yes, thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks to both presenters, and everyone have a good afternoon. Thanks again. Take care, everybody.
Great job, Christy.
Thanks,
Thank
Carrie.
you very much, Christy.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.